Hey guys, welcome back to First and 10 over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm your host, Pete, joined sadly not today by my normal co-host, Brian. Our schedule's it was really tight this week and it just didn't work out. And this is like late Wednesday night. I'm recording this, trying to do a real quick, maybe 25, 30-minute podcast for you guys because I definitely wanted to talk about some major storylines this week and, of course, give my picks, recap a couple of the games. But yeah, unfortunately and sadly, it did not work out with Brian this week. I know he was eager to come on, and I'm looking forward to hearing his thoughts next week when we'll most likely get back together. So I'm in that thing that I've done before, I think 2 other times, where it's a little odd. It does feel a little weird doing this podcast by myself. But you know what? Hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, you'll be fine with that, and you'll still find me interesting even by myself. We have a lot to talk about, and as I said, it is late, so I'm going to run through things as efficiently as I can. We got to start off. Coming off week 2, we're heading into week 3. It's where we're sitting. The amount of QB injuries that have already occurred in the first 2 weeks it's honestly disheartening. And you never want to see players get hurt, of course. It's just the nature of football. It's the NFL. I mean, that's what happens. But especially at the most important position in the game, that's something you don't want to see. And, we start in Cincinnati, right? Joe Burrow, he's now out for 3 months. Some reports say they could just be saying that right now, but it could end up being the entire season. He tears a grade 3 tear, I believe, of his of turf toe, which is something on the surface. I was talking about this with a few coworkers this week. You hear turf toe, and it doesn't really seem like that bad of an injury. They even said, it was a toe thing during the game against Jacksonville this week, and you think about it, and you're like, oh well. He could come back on the field. Even the announcers were kind of saying, there's a possibility he's not being ruled out until it was later in the game. And then I looked more into turf toe. It was coming across my timeline on Twitter and all that stuff. And turf toe, especially to this severity, is really nasty. It basically means that your big toe, in this case for Joe Burrow, bends all the way back to the point that it can't bend anymore and it snaps. And his ligaments actually on that bottom part of his foot connecting his main, kind of big toe and those first 2 toes, all those ligaments completely snapped, which is requiring surgery and is why he is out for an extended period of time. So it is one of those weird things, right, where it's like turf toe doesn't sound intimidating. It doesn't sound like a serious injury, but I definitely took a new appreciation for it this week. And reading more about it and watching, some videos and people cover it. And I'm like, wow, this is actually a lot more serious than I thought it was. People describe it as like every step you take when it's this severe feels like someone's putting like a needle or a nail underneath your toenail, which is, oh God, it's excruciating to think about something like that. To know that that's what Joe Burrow was probably going through. It's sad. He's a top 4 quarterback in the league. He's a prime MVP candidate. We were talking about that on our prediction show. He got some MVP votes last year, even though the team didn't even make the playoffs. And now, once again, Cincinnati is in this unique position where normally under Joe Burrow, they have not been 2-0, him and Zach Taylor. They are. They've squeaked out 2 of these wins. And somehow it still is bad. And their franchise quarterback is down and is out for an extended period of time or maybe the whole season. And Jake Browning is going to step in. I mean, they pulled off kind of a miracle game that the Jags really gave to them on Sunday because Browning throws 3 picks in relief. Not something you're normally going to see win a game. But hey, hats off to Cincinnati. They gritted it out and they won it. But I think we have to talk about the larger picture of Joe Burrow of, this is a guy that this is not his first major injury. He had the wrist injury going on. He obviously had the knee torn up in his rookie season, was completely obliterated, ACL, I think MCL, everything like that. He's had nagging injuries, and he's had serious injuries. And I think, I hate putting players in this box of injury prone, but I think he kind of fits that definition at this point in his not even young career anymore. We're talking about a guy who I believe in his 6th season now. At some point, you have to protect yourself. A lot of the blame is deserved to Cincinnati, right? Their offensive line has been, I think, if you look on Pro Football Focus, has been like 28 or below pretty much every single season that he's been there. I totally grant that, right? Mike Brown, the owner, is cheap. They have not invested. We've seen this movie before in Cincinnati, specifically with another former first overall pick in Carson Palmer many years ago. He got severely hurt, had kind of second life when he went to Arizona. He wasn't protected. I'm all for that. I'd say 75 to 80% of the problem is that. But there is an element that it is also Joe Burrow. It is Joe Burrow in things that he can control and he can't control. In the parts he can't control, some players' bodies just betray them. Some players, it's just hard to describe, are just more injury prone. Sometimes they're more aggressive, sometimes they're not. Sometimes they're, kind of quick and twitchy and they have a lot of lateral movement. Oh, that's why they get hurt. Sometimes they're statues in the pocket. There's no rhyme or reason why some players just get hurt more than others. Maybe that's to do with conditioning and diets and how you spend your off seasons, how you lift. That could be elements that I can't speak to. I wasn't a football player, but just logically and going to the gym myself, that's what I would think plays into it. And then I think sometimes there's luck involved. There's a little bit of bad luck. The other element, though, that he can control in Joe Burrow is he has a tendency to maybe sit in the pocket longer than he's allowed to, given his offensive line. And he's aware of that. He's a smart guy. We've seen great quarterbacks in Brady, Rodgers, Mahomes, all these guys over the years that sometimes the ball has to come out so fast, 2.1 seconds or under, because your offensive line can't hold up. And Joe has not developed that skill or that awareness yet to this point in his career that shows, hey, you can't take the deep shot to Higgins and Jamar all the time. Sometimes you have to take the check down to Gesicki or to Chase Brown or to Yoshivas. You have to do those things to keep yourself alive. They say, the best skill you could have is availability, right? That's kind of the best trait that you could have. And this is becoming a recurring problem. And him not being on the field while this team somehow has eked out 2 wins and is 2-0 to start the season, which is a very unfamiliar spot for Cincinnati to be in. It's just tough, man. It's tough to see, and I hope this is the injury that not only he could come back from, but he also could start learning how to take better care of his body and get that ball out quicker and do something. There's got to be a way that can he lean on the owner for a better offensive line. What can they do to improve things in Cincinnati? And it's really unfortunate how that went. It's going to be kind of an unedited and, fun podcast here. Very casual here on a late Wednesday night, so hopefully you're okay with that. But speaking of QB injuries, we also go over to Brock Purdy. We know Brock Purdy, he missed last week. Mac Jones wins in relief. Hey, hats off to Mac Jones, who I still don't think is a very great quarterback. But, hey, he played well, and there'll definitely be arguments, between Brian and I where we're both on the same side in the future because we both were really not Brock Purdy guys in these years that he's been starting. Now plugging in a new quarterback into Kyle Shanahan's system. Just saying, there's something to talk about if that continues. But he does have a chance to play this week. I saw that pop up in the injury report. But he's dealing with, I guess, a less minor turf toe and a shoulder issue. And you want to talk about another quarterback that, yeah, he's been in the league half the time that Burrow has. But he's been a very injury-prone player that has had serious injuries and nagging injuries. Him having kind of that whole issue with the elbow in the NFC Championship, we forget about that because it was the last game of the season for the 49ers a couple of years ago. Oh, I think it was like 3 years ago now, right? That was a serious kind of like Tommy John-like pitcher injury. And we're talking about a guy that's, he's mobile. I think he's more mobile than Joe Burrow, but he's not overly mobile. He's not Mahomes or Allen or Lamar. And he's also a guy that he's a little smaller in stature. Now, he's not Bryce Young, Kyler Murray kind of height, but he is a smaller guy. And I think it plays into his situation back when he was at Iowa that he kind of had a reputation that he could have some nagging injuries, be a little injury prone. And we're seeing that continue here. Now, they gave him the bag this offseason. So, you give him over $250 million, you're riding with this quarterback at least for the next couple of years until however the contracts, you can look that up on the NFLcontracts.com sites to look in all the nerdy details. But I think that is a continual problem that the 49ers are facing, just like the Bengals are facing. And the sad thing with Purdy is I don't look at it like with Joe where he's holding on the ball for so long or his offensive line is so bad. It's okay outside of Trent Williams, but he has had nagging, consistent injuries, and he might not play this week. J.J. McCarthy, he missed all of last year with a torn meniscus. Normally not an injury, you stay out the whole year, stayed out the entire year. And now 2 games into his career where 7 of his 8 quarters of football have been ugly, he's out now for over a month with a sprained ankle injury. Hey, congratulations to him. On a side note, he's a new father. Congratulations to him. That's awesome. But from a football perspective, that hurts your team. Now, there are people I've seen, on Twitter and stuff like that. So some people talking. I think it was another podcast that was like Minnesota Viking fans that they're not really feeling bad right now with that. I can't say that with the 49ers. I think Brock Purdy is definitely a better player than Mac Jones, but Carson Wentz, who might come in and who is definitely coming in relief this week for the Vikings, it'll be a backup matchup of Jake Browning versus Carson Wentz. They might say that's an upgrade. I have heard that, and honestly, at this point, I would kind of agree. McCarthy, outside of one quarter where the Bears collapsed, has not looked good. But it is sad to see that you don't get to see even the failures of the development of a young player because he's out. And now, the big question right now, Jaden Daniels plays Thursday night last week against the Packers, loses, I think it was like 27-18. He's dealing with a knee sprain. Now, the Commanders got annihilated in that game in terms of injuries in Eckler, and they lost a corner, and they're beat up everywhere. And Eckler's, sadly out for the year with a torn Achilles, which I knew it immediately when I was watching on Thursday night. I was like, non-contact, he immediately grabbed the Achilles. Obviously, it's over. But, we had to take a doctor to figure that situation out. But with Jaden Daniels, this is kind of a coin flip game now. He's dealing with a knee sprain, and I don't want to invoke RG3, but I will. You're wearing the same uniform. It's another guy dealing with a knee injury. I hope that this staff, and I believe in Dan Quinn, will be smarter to take, more than, Jay Gruden back in the days of RG3, to not push him, not put him out in a situation that he could get severely hurt and end up being out for the year and tear his ACL or something even worse, multiple muscles in the knee, a knee dislocation added with that. Who knows? It's sad to see that quarterbacks through 2 weeks already, major quarterbacks for these teams, some of the stars in the league, and Daniels and Burrow, they're out. And I hate to see it. I know you hate to see it. And we just have to hope that, it's football, but we especially don't want to start losing our quarterbacks because we've seen that over the years, and it leads to really bad football. Guys, we're going to get into a couple games tonight here. As I said, a little quick and dirty podcast here. We're going to go to the Cowboys and the Giants, recapping some of these week 2 games. Cowboys defeat the Giants in Arlington, 40-37, and another great game. Bills-Ravens because of the magnitude of those teams, but also the game. Amazing game, probably best game of the season. But this has got to be right up there to start the young season. Back and forth, going to overtime. The fourth quarter was insane. 41 points scored between both teams in the fourth quarter. I mean, crazy stuff. The shots, Wilson was taken to Neighbors, to Wan'Dale Robinson, and then Dak is coming right back with it. Absolutely insane stuff. Man, is that, we don't expect a lot out of the Giants. We expect a little bit more out of Dallas, even before the Micah trade and definitely after it. But God, that Dallas D is bad, isn't it? It's really bad. When you have a guy in Russell Wilson looking totally washed, getting killed by the New York media the week before, scores 6 points against a Washington defense that I don't think any of us regard as some top tier, even top 15 level defense. For him to turn back the clock, but let's not even talk about turn back the clock with Russ. We're talking about a guy that set a career day, 73 completion percentage, 450 yards most of his career, 3 touchdowns, and 1 awful pick in overtime, which we'll get to in a second. That was a great game from Russ. That was a great game for fans and 2 teams that I don't think any of us really believe are making the playoffs. They might not even be 500 either of these teams. But to see that go out in the field, have 2 kind of gunslingers back and forth. I mean, Dak himself, a little over 73%, 361 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a pick. He played great. That was fun football. I loved it. And you don't question that the Giants, Wandale, I think, deserves a little more credit than he's been given. Neighbors feel like if he could keep his head on his shoulders, he's a bona fide stud. He's a star. He could be a superstar. But, there's not really much going on. I mean, the Giants' offensive line, terrible. I mean, we see in this game, big free agent signing. They got Hudson at left tackle because Andrew Thomas, their elite left tackle, is another one constantly hurt in this league. Hasn't even played a snap this season. I'd never seen anything like that in the first quarter. I mean, have you? Hudson, I think, had 4 penalties on the drive. I think he had a holding, a personal foul, a face mask, and a false start. Did the gauntlet. I mean, it's insane stuff. And then losing, getting so emotional on the sideline, losing it after that drive. Of course, they pulled him later. But I don't even know how he was allowed to finish the drive from Brian Daboll. To have Jameis and the teammates trying to calm him down for what? What are you mad about? You're playing bad. You're definitely playing way above the level. You got to tone it down a little bit, and you get a little crazy out there on the first drive. You can't be doing that. And they negated, I think, a run from Tracy. They were killing the Giants. He was killing the Giants on that drive, and I think they still ended up at a field goal. And on the other side of it, you have the Cowboys, where a little more collected, a little more buttoned up than I thought they'd be in these last 2 games here. First 2 games to start the season with Brian Schottenheimer. He deserves a lot of credit. I think the offenses look great through 2 games. The defense, really bad. But you got to put a highlight on, we expect CeeDee Lamb to do what he does. Even Pickens to be playing the way he does. And they both had a great game. But Javonte Williams might be a sneaky pickup here. You remember, the Cowboys are a team last year. No running back. Had nothing going on. He's been, he was in Denver. He dealt with some injuries, kind of got buried in the depth chart. He has provided pop, spark to the backfield of Dallas. He went 18 for 97 and a touchdown in this game. That's what you want to see. You mix in a little bit of Turpin for some fun stuff. You got old man Miles Sanders getting in there for a touchdown. But you could run this through Javonte Williams, Pickens, CeeDee Lamb, Ferguson. Pretty good offensive line. I mean, this is what we said. Dak was going to cook this season. And, it sounds crazy. I'm going to say it. I don't think this Cowboy team is going to be that great. 8-9, 9-8, maybe 7-10. There might be whispers the way things go. With Burrow gone, the way Mahomes is playing. Prescott, at the end of the day, can get some second and third place MVP votes by the end of the season. I believe they have that level of talent. And he has that ability to really go crazy in this offense. He's done it before. Before we wrap up the rest of this game, as I said, let's get to the pick in overtime from Russell Wilson. The game goes in overtime. Well, actually, let's even go to the fourth quarter. The Giants trying to ice out the game. Cowboys get the ball. Need a field goal to tie. Why the Giants were playing so off coverage that it's even being pointed out by the broadcast booth was beyond me. Beyond me when that the Cowboys have, I would say, the best weapon in the sport at this point in Brandon Aubrey. A guy that has a missile, a cannon for a leg. And you're just playing off coverage on the last drive of the game? What are we doing? It seemed like a really strange strategy to me. And then they're running a draw play is the last play before they kick the field goal because they were that confident that Aubrey was fine. 64 yards. I mean, think about that. 64 yards. It was unheard of. I mean, guys, remember 10 years ago, I sound like an old man. I'm dating myself, and maybe I am. But you get a 52-yard field goal. Guys were like, oh, this is a long kick, man. I don't know if this guy's going to make it. 64 yards, was nothing. Probably was good from 74 yards. I mean, I've never seen a leg like this. I don't know. I understand they got new kicking balls. There's different training regimens. A lot of these guys are kicking crazy, but that dude's an alien, man. To think he wasn't even involved in football. I think he was like a soccer player they pulled off the couch. What a find by the Cowboys and Jerry and Stephen Jones. I'll give them that, at least credit on that. And to kick that field goal, hit it in overtime. I mean, you knew he was going to hit it. You just knew it. 64 yards, you just knew he was going to hit it. Because not only it's him, but it's just this aura, this funk around the Giants. You knew they weren't going to prevail. And then you get into overtime, and it goes back and forth. And the Giants, I think they had the ball twice. Cowboys had it 3 times. Goes right down the last second of the 10-minute overtime. And the pick Russ threw that seals it was egregious. It's atrocious. He's, 37 years old? Been in the league a long time, been to Super Bowls, Super Bowl champion. You can't be doing that. Can't be doing that. And it was nice to see he was happy, he was enjoying it, he really seemed pumped up, and he was in it. That's a critical. It's a backbreaker. It's literally a game loser. And the Cowboys prevail. They get out of this, and I like to see more from the Giants' running game going forward. You know, it's the question on everybody's mind. When is Jackson Dart going to start? They kind of platooned him in and out in this game with some weird plays. He ran the ball and lost 3 yards. Hate that. Don't stop doing that. I hate when teams do that. You have 2 quarterbacks, you have no quarterbacks. Don't do that. But overall, we'll see how this plays out for the Giants and the Cowboys this season. But, man, hell of a game in week 2. The other game I want to talk about before we get into our picks. Colts 29, Denver 28. And I wanted to highlight this game. I thought about doing Chiefs, Eagles. But I was like, you know what? Let's just be honest with myself and the audience. Yeah, it was a Super Bowl rematch. But was that game not boring between the Chiefs and the Eagles? It was boring. I'm not even a guy that has to have a 50-49 game. I like a defensive game. Rams-Texans was a good defensive game. They played in week 1. It was just boring. It's boring to watch the tush push and then line up off sides, which was clearly pointed out by Brady. I've been knowing that for 3 years. It's boring to watch Mahomes just miss on passes to Tyquan Thornton before he hit the touchdown that he always hit, did it in his sleep. There's no run game for the Chiefs. It's just boring. And so I was like, let me go to a game that I found excitement in that I watched this whole game. And it's time to give Daniel Jones some props. Now, I'm not going over the moon because it's only 2 weeks. We watched 6 years. I watched 6 years of Daniel Jones. He wasn't very good. Now, is a lot of that chalked up to the Giants organization? Maybe. But his skill himself got a lot of questions there. But I got to say, in this Shane Steichen offense, through 2 weeks, he's looked great. We just got to be real. We got to give the guy props. And he has a rushing touchdown in this game. Didn't really rush it great. 6 carries for 2 yards. But 23 of 34 to 67.6% completion percentage. 316 and a touchdown. I mean, that pass, I think he had to Downs. I think it was Downs or Pierce. I think it might have been Pierce down the right sideline. That's a touch. That's a great throw. He did that consistently all game. And he deserves a lot of props. There's no way this team's 2-0. They're 0-2 if they start Anthony Richardson right now. Just facts. Just truth. And that has impressed me. But, I got my guy JT. Went for 165 in this game. Love JT. One of my favorite players in the NFL. Got some more weapons over there than I thought in Indy. But let's be real. They should have lost this game. Denver plays pretty well. I definitely have some concerns about Denver. Their defense was a little leaky here, but overall I trust it. I'm actually giving more props to Shane Steichen and Daniel Jones. But Bo Nix, he's 22 of 30 for 206 in this game, 3 touchdowns and a pick. The pick, horrible. But it was terrible. Oh, my God, I don't even know what he's looking at. But not a great week 1 for Bo Nix. Week 2, if you look at the stats, you go, they're pretty good. Yeah, but if you watch the game, I just didn't really think he controlled or managed the game super effectively. I just didn't. And I've not been impressed through the first 2 weeks. And then it gets down to it where Denver should win this game. It's 28-26, Colts need a field goal. They get a young kicker up in there. And they get something like a 60-yard field goal. This ain't Brandon Aubrey. Even in a dome, I'm like, this guy's going to miss it. He's new. It's a new situation. Boat misses it. I pick Denver. I'm happy. I think they're going to win. There's the flag. Ends up getting called for a leverage penalty, which is basically the guy that is lined up over the center on a field goal. They put their hands on him. They tried to jump over him, and they touch the center. Now, you could do a clean jump over the center, maybe with a running start without touching them. But once you do that leverage, once you push off, once you use them to get up, it's a penalty. It's a safety issue. NFL's been doing that for the last few years. And a bonehead move and a call that's not called that often, it's pretty rare. To see the game end like that, You hate to see it. And the Colts get out of there. Credit to them, 2-0 for the first time since 2009. But they get out of there with a sneaky win. They played well. It was a great game between both teams. But they get out of there with a sneaky win. And you gotta wonder what Sean Payton was saying to his crew. Because they had some uncharacteristic dumb penalties even in the fourth quarter. The terrible pick by Bo Nix. You got to wonder how he was tearing them a new one, I think, in the locker room. And they're 1-1. Chiefs are 0-2. Raiders are 1-1. Chargers, they're right there. But they've looked shaky through 2 games. I feel totally different about both of these teams. I'm not fully buying all this stock in Daniel Jones. Feeling pretty good about the Colts in a weak division. Broncos in a tough division. Chiefs are going to bounce back. Not feeling great through 2 weeks, especially offensively. But hell of a game, man, between both of these teams. And you look at it, man, if the Colts could get this type of production, Tyler Warren, the rookie, he looked amazing. He was a guy I wanted the Rams to take. He was never going to be there at that spot. Apparently, they had significant interest in him. I see why. We drafted tight end on a side note in the second round in Terrence Ferguson. He's barely seen the field. Don't even get me started on Les Snead late round picks. But Alex Pierce, Downs, Pittman, Mitchell, Mo Alley Cox is still on this team. They got a damn good roster, man. I'm really looking forward to seeing if Daniel Jones could keep this up and what the Colts are this season. So, guys, hopefully I didn't keep you here too long. Hopefully my voice hasn't put you to sleep at this point because it's just me. I know you're missing Brian. I'm missing him too. But we're going to get into some picks real quick. Lightning round here. It's late. I got to go to bed. I'm going to start off on the Thursday night game tomorrow night. Dolphins head to the Bills. Look, the Dolphins are what they are at this point. Mike McDaniels is getting fired. I've said this before the halfway point in the season. Press conferences between him and Tua separately. Getting really weird, man. Like I said last week, him talking something about death. Then this week he said, to win the game, something along the lines of, to win the game, you can't lose the game, you have to win the game. Well, duh. Like, just some weird stuff going on there. And then the Bills are a juggernaut right now. Are they not the best team in football? Got some things to clean up defensively, for sure. But, man, they look great. Even in a kind of a pedestrian game where Josh Allen gets his nose messed up or broken or whatever, Josh Allen has owned the Dolphins. They're in Buffalo. This is going to be a rout. Give me Buffalo all the way. The Sunday night games kick off. The Sunday day games kick off at 1 o'clock. Falcons, Panthers. I've kind of gone back and forth on this game. Saw some good things with the Panthers in week 2 and almost that comeback victory against Arizona, but they ended up losing. Bryce Young is still an enigma for me. Definitely more on the kind of going to be a bust side. And Penix, quiet game in week 2. Let the run game in Algier and Bijan handle it. They look really good and dominant in that way. And this defense against Minnesota, and this defense for Atlanta is a little sneaky. I'm taking the Falcons to go into Carolina and win this one. The Packers host the Browns. And, yeah, you'll have to watch for Myles Garrett. But, man, the Packers are awesome. They're the NFC juggernaut. I think Jordan Love could play better. They lost Jaron Reed on Thursday night, out with a broken collarbone. Probably going to miss most of, if not all of this season. Feel for him. All these, Packer skill players, wide receivers, always getting hurt. They got to get Matthew Golden going, the rookie. But they got overwhelming force here, man. And this defense is great. And you're going against old 40-year-old Joe Flacco. I don't think this game is going to be particularly close. I think you'll still see Myles Garrett, Denzel Ward make their mark. But I'm taking the Packers in this one. The Texans visit the Jags. And this is a huge game. Jags low-key under new head coach Liam Cohen. A little shaky. Kind of falling apart a little. You saw a little bit of back and forth there that they brushed off, of course, between Trevor Lawrence and Cohen, where he waved him off. Trevor Lawrence waved him off. Brian Thomas looks like a shell of himself. He was so great last year as a rookie. He was a great receiver. He's like, I don't know, he's supposedly banged up. Is that why he seems like he's scared to take hits? Dropped the key fourth down last week that ultimately ended up losing them the game against Cincinnati. He's just looked poor. He got targeted 12 times last week, caught 4 balls. And then you have the Texans, who honestly have not played bad. Played my Rams defensive game, end up getting peanut punched at the end of the game by Nate Landman. And then in this game, you have, Baker over there leads a comeback drive in kind of the final seconds, the last minute of the fourth quarter, they lose by 1 point. They've lost by a combined 6 points in the first 2 games. There's something there, and we know how good that defense is. We've seen it. Offensively, it's kind of what we expected. The offensive line is not great. You trade away your best player in Laramie Tunsil. Mixon, well, he's out. He's on the PUP list, probably going to miss the whole year. Tank Dell, he's probably going to miss most of the year. Yeah, Nico Collins is great, but they don't use Dalton Schultz. They don't get any of these guys, even Higgins that they have there now. They don't get any of these guys involved. And C.J. Stroud, the truth is, he just hasn't looked the same since his rookie year. This is a put up or shut up game. There's a lot here of who's going to win this. I'm going to take Houston. I just find it hard to believe they're going to go 0-3. And I also don't fully believe in Jacksonville. These are 2 teams I actually had making the playoffs in the AFC and from this division. And I think Texans get on the board. I won't be shocked if the Jags win. I think it's a big game for both teams. But I'm taking the Texans. I think it means a little bit more. The Bengals head to the Vikings, as I said earlier. The game all of a sudden of the backups. Jake Browning against Carson Wentz from Minnesota. I don't know how I feel. Both teams have great weapons. Bengals have a little bit more weaponry. It looks like Aaron Jones for the Vikings not going to play, although Jordan Mason at running back has honestly looked better this season. I rode with the Vikings last week because they were at home. But the truth is J.J. McCarthy just didn't look good. And I guess I thought from that fourth quarter that was the kind of over-the-hill moment where he would have a little bit of a spark, went completely back to where it was, the opposite way. And then you have Browning, who, 3 turnovers, really eked that one out. I mean, there's some things you like that he does, but I just don't know if I love it. I'm taking the Minnesota Vikings in this one. I just think Brian Flores, I think there's a better defense that can confuse Jake Browning. And I think at home in this game, hostile environment, just coming off a home loss. I think Carson Wentz, honestly, is an upgrade at this point. I'm taking the Vikings. Steelers go to the Patriots. Kind of an interesting game. Drake May played pretty good last week, and that win really due to the special teams against the Dolphins. Steelers, on the other hand, did not look good at all. Even, Rodgers throws the 2 picks, but he could have had a couple more, even to ex-Ram Darion Kendrick, just throwing it right at guys. I've been kind of back and forth on how I feel about this game, just because I don't really think either team is super talented. But at the end of the day, I do believe there's a little bit more talent, a little bit more belief in the Steelers, and I'm taking Pittsburgh to go into Foxborough and win that game, giving the Steelers. Maybe the game of the week, the Rams against the Eagles in one of the best matchups of the playoffs last season, really the only team that gave them the run for their money. The Rams coming off a great game, a great second-half performance against the Titans, winning that game 33-19. We got some questions this week. Is Steve Avila, the left guard, going to play? Now Braden Fisk popped up with an oblique thing. He got hurt in the playoff game against them last year. He might miss this game. They get some injuries they're knocking around. For me, it's just a mismatch. I just don't think the Rams, they can play the Eagles well, but I don't think they can get over the hump, especially if they have those injuries like that. I'm taking the Philadelphia Eagles, who I don't think have been insanely good, especially in the passing game, but they know how to win. It's going to be boring. They're going to grind it out. I'm taking Philly in what I think is going to be a really good game between both of these teams. Puka and Devontae. Devontae getting going last week. It's going to be a real fun one. Hopefully, we could contain Barkley a little bit more than giving up 260 yards like we did last season in that blowout at home. The Jets head to the Bucks. I mean, Tampa, look, 2 come-from-behind wins. 5 straight seasons starting off 2-0. And what can you say about the Jets? Talk about other QB injuries. Justin Fields might not even play this week. It might be Tyrod Taylor because Justin Fields sadly suffering, someone who's had some injury-prone moments, suffering a concussion last week. I'm taking the Bucks all the way. I know they lost Cansey. It's a huge loss on their defensive line for the season with a torn pectoral, but I'm taking the Bucks. They're just the better team. The Colts head to the Titans, and the Titans have shown flashes, but I got to be real. If I'm going to believe in this Colts team and ride with Daniel Jones right now and believe that this is not an enigma for 2 games, I got to pick the Colts. I'm taking them. I just think the Titans have a lot of kinks still to work out. And the Colts, I feel like there's too much weaponry there. They're kind of sneaky good on defense. I mean, Tennessee's pretty good too, but I'm taking the Colts. The final 1 o'clock game is the Raiders at the Commanders. Geno, going into maybe Jaden Daniels' house. This is the only game I will say. I don't normally do this for picks, but it is Wednesday. I reserve the right to kind of get a mulligan on this pick because I'm not sure if Jaden's playing or not. That greatly determines how I'm going to feel about this. Right now, on Wednesday night, I have a feeling he's not going to play. So give me the Raiders. I think they bounce back in this one. I think with Marcus Mariota potentially starting for Washington, I just like more of the vibe, more of the gunslinger against not a great defense in the Commanders. I think the Raiders bounce back in what was an awful game for Geno on Monday night. Give me them. If Daniels plays, I'll probably switch back to the Commanders. That's kind of where I'm sitting at right now. The 405 games start off with the Broncos at the Chargers. Big game for Bo Nix, man. As I said earlier, he's not looked great for through 2 games this season, in my opinion. And, man, what can you say about these Chargers right now? Harbaugh's got them playing, man. Jim Harbaugh's got them going. I'm taking the Chargers at home, I believe. Even against that Broncos defense, they do a little bit more offensively. They win this game. Even with Khalil Mack now going to miss several weeks with a dislocated elbow, I believe there's enough there for the Chargers. Give me the Chargers. The Saints head to the Seahawks in a game that the Seahawks up in Seattle should easily win. I know Sam Darnold has not looked fantastic. I believe it will get going. I'm taking Seattle in this one. The 425 games kick off with the Cowboys at the Bears, and a huge, really not a big game for the Cowboys, a huge game for the Bears. Yeah, they're probably not making the playoffs, and they probably know it. But with the expectations with Ben Johnson getting blown out against your old team in Detroit last week, you got to bounce back in this game. You got to play better. I think they will. I'm just not picking them. I'm taking the Cowboys. I just think sneakily, not even sneakily, very, very obviously, the Bears' defense has been atrocious. I think that's been even more than the story with Caleb Williams and all his issues. And as I praised earlier, Dallas's offense through 2 weeks has looked great. I think they're going to feast. And I don't believe in the Bears enough to take advantage of the Cowboys' kind of poor defense. Might be a shootout, but I'm taking Dallas. And what a disaster start that would be for Ben Johnson. The other 425 game is the Cardinals at the Niners. Two 2-0 teams that honestly we probably didn't expect to be 2-0, considering as well if we threw into that equation, Brock Purdy's going to miss one of those 2 games. You're going to have Mac Jones. But here we are in a game that Purdy could start, but it could be Mac Jones. Who are you going to pick here? I'm taking the 49ers, even if it is Mac Jones. I believe Kyle Shanahan. I believe in him more. I think the Cardinals kind of eking that win out last week against the Panthers, kind of collapsing penalty-wise and everything, kind of trying to give that game away to Carolina last week. I just think the Niners are more buttoned up. Even if it is Mac Jones, they have CMC, which is a huge weapon. I'm taking the Niners. I think they're going to knock off the Cardinals, who, frankly, until they prove it, how many of us really believe in them for a whole season? The Sunday night game is kind of a stinker, to be honest, just like the Thursday night game. It's the Chiefs and the Giants. I don't think this is going to be a shootout. I think it's going to be a very low-scoring game. I'm taking the Chiefs in this one. I think they're going to come in and win. But these days, they don't score, especially they got no Worthy probably this week. They're definitely not going to have Rice. It's going to be a boring game, maybe 20-13. I'm taking the Chiefs. And the final game on Monday night, the only really good primetime game, one of the only good games of the weekend, the Detroit Lions head into Baltimore in a matchup that a few years ago, Baltimore annihilated them. That was, I think, a 1 o'clock game, but annihilated Detroit. Even when Detroit was Detroit, this is a huge game for both teams and just kind of a measuring stick of where you're at. And also, you don't want to drop to 1-2. That being said, I'm taking the Ravens. I just think they are firing on all cylinders right now, even despite week 1 where, they kind of choked that game away at the end. Lamar looked great last week. He's easily an early MVP frontrunner candidate. The Lions kind of got their swagger back. I honestly didn't even believe they really lost it even after week 1. It just shows how good the Packers are. This is going to be a high score and I think really fun game. I just think the Ravens, they'll get Derrick Henry going again. I think Lamar has, obviously more to his game than Jared Goff. I think they can do a little bit more, and their defense is certainly better than Detroit's defense. I think it'll be a good one, but I'm taking the Baltimore Ravens. And with that, guys, that wraps up kind of week 2 recap, week 3 picks here on First and 10. I hope you all enjoyed just hanging out with me. Sadly, Brian, his socials are down below. He should be back next week. Please comment on the video. Talk to us. Did I put you to sleep during this video? Tell me your picks, predictions, and all that stuff, and all these QB injuries and anything else you want to talk about. I would love to hear from you. I love responding and interacting with your comments down below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you be so kind. And until next week of First and 10, thanks for watching.